Joining me now to reflect on voting day thus far is Professor William Gumede, who is the Executive Chairperson of Democracy Works. Prof, thank you so much for your time. What do you make of the views around the uniqueness of this particular election? On the one hand, people are saying that it's just basically a race between the three parties, DA, ANC and EFF. On the other hand, people are saying, well, with the new smaller parties and independent candidates, what it's done now is expand the so-called competition beyond the three parties. Are you seeing it that way?
Yes, this is a bellwether election. It's a very important election for us in South Africa because a couple of things are happening in the election much more broadly. I think the first thing is the big question, of course, whether South Africans who have a political culture of protesting in the street, whether they will be able to turn that and protest at the ballot box, because protesting in the street, of course, is short-term, whereas protesting in the ballot box is much more effective and so on. And because of our past culture of protests in the streets, that people prefer that. And when election day come, people don't go to vote because they then say, well, the parties or his or her party didn't deliver, I won't vote. So I think the voting turnout is going to be absolutely important to see whether we've broken that culture. The second thing for me also will be very important is to see whether we can break a culture, a political culture, which is also across Africa, is the idea that people vote still on loyalty, even if their own party fails in government. They still go back and they still vote. Whether we can break that cycle, because if we don't break the cycle, of course, we will then end up like many other African countries. It's just we recycle failure, and failure because we have to break the cycle. And then for me, thirdly, the really big thing about this election is whether as voters, will they be able to vote for other parties or for independent candidates if they don't like it? It might not be their favorites other party, but they still voted for those parties in order to hold their own preferred parties accountable. I think so. It's a bellwether election.
On that issue around, the political parties and the independent, candidates, coalitions, or as they've been described so far, the marriages of convenience might not be, avoidable. Have you started thinking around the combinations, or let's put it this way, the marriages that might not work?
I mean, it is, of course, I hear people are very critical of coalitions because, there's been some really high-profile failures of local government coalitions. But, I mean, if you look at it in broad basis, 2016, actually more coalitions actually worked after the 2016 election. If we go to the smaller towns and so on, I mean, Natal, the Western Cape, so the majority of coalitions have actually worked. I think the challenge is going to be going forward, or rather before I go to the challenge, a country like South Africa, we're the world's most diverse country, and we're also diverse. Coalitions are much better for our system, for our diversity. Our diversity, monopoly parties, dominant parties, isn't really ideal for our kind of countries, and especially at a local level. So coalitions is a good thing. And I think this election most probably will bring us really massive coalitions. I mean, 2016, of course, brought in coalitions. I think there should be a rise. And related to that, also, I think, for me, a very exciting new phenomenon at a local level is the rise of independent candidates. And I mean, either independent candidates on their own, or in loose federations like those, of Muslim Amani. That's going to be important. And then thirdly, a community-based candidates who are standing at a local level and want to deliver. And they are going to play a very critical role, I think, in coalitions. And they are going to sift or determine what kind of coalitions is going to be possible at a local level.
On that note, then, let's talk about the dynamics that we might see, in the different provinces. Are there provinces that you are keeping an eye on? For instance, let's, bring in KZN here. They're going into this election on the back of the July unrest and various other issues that have come to the fore, the sort of political fights that have basically, in some cases, turned deadly. Are there provinces that you're keeping an eye on?
I think it's going to be, KwaZulu-Natal, of course, is going to be particularly important because they, after diluting the ANC, they're deeply divided. Some of former President Jacob Zuma's supporters are very unenthusiastic about campaigning or supporting the ANC. They either may stay away, so we may actually have potentially maybe have a large group of people in KZN staying away, or alternatively, they will be vote for other parties. And in KZN also, and there are also a number of ANC members who are actually standing as independents, and that's also a new phenomenon. So for ANC members who are card-carrying members of the ANC who are independents, who are actually standing against their own parties because they don't agree, perhaps with President Cyril Ramaphosa. So I think we're going to see more coalitions in KZN. The Free State is another province, really, that we may see more coalitions now. In 2016, we didn't see coalitions, or rather big coalitions in the Free State. I think we'll see a sea change there. Many supporters are former ANC General Secretary Ace Magashule. Of course, they are unhappy. They're angry with his treatment. Some of them also, again, like in KZN, are standing as independents. And others will be voting today for different parties. And again, so we're likely to see coalitions, particularly there. Then, of course, in the Western Cape, if we look back since 2016, some of the coalitions sort of on the West Coast or Southern Western Cape have actually been very, very stable. And people are beginning to get used to, particularly in the Western Cape, to working coalitions. So we are likely to see, I think, more coalitions in the Western Cape also.
Prof, thank you so much for your time. That is Professor William Gumede, who is the Executive Chairperson of Democracy Work. Nzinga, over to you.